camp now. Yes, I didn't see him. What are you looking so sad about, Jack?
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm really insulted. That's not right, what you just said.
What do you mean, what I just said?
I mean, I'm getting a drink of water. I'm late getting home, but you talking. I said something about the greatest heavyweight champ, man. I'm a hometown man, and you talking about Joe Louis, man. Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe, I tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, Clay, one time during my career, I brought a Formula One tour.
I would have been a bum compared to you.
What's happening, my people? It's Cast Sports again, back for another afternoon with the family. That's right. You know what time it is. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Box Historian bringing you all that boxing history. Boxing is the greatest sport of them all. That's why we love it. Can't get enough of it. Miss Cass, Al Booger. Salute to everyone and welcome to another episode of Cast Sports, the Box Historian. Today, boxing greats, 1900 to 1950. Boxing greats from 1900 to 1950. How's the family today? It's Friday. We're going to have our profile, but we're going to look at 8 different boxers today. The 10 to 15 minute talks about their careers, their lives around boxing. And as promised, we're going to start out with Edward Gunboat Smith. Edward Gunboat Smith is going to start it off. But before we do all that, we got to have our fight of the day, and that's going to come from that same period, 1900 to 1950. So now, without further ado, the fight of the day. Okay, today's fight of the day will be Fidel LaBarbera versus William Clark, January 21st, 1927. LaBarbera versus Clark. And salute to Mike Grimm in the building. Salute, Mike. Just getting ready to start our fight of the day. Fidel LaBarbera versus William Clark, January 21st, 1927. Way deep into the archives today. We got a good one. Good show today. No, great show today. Okay. LaBarbera versus Clark, 1927. Flyweight wasn't much of a division until Jimmy Wald came along. Now, while not the first of the little champions, the ghost with the hammer in his hand showed that even a pint-sized pugilist could carry a murderous punch. And he reigned as flyweight's best for the better part of a decade. Waiting in the wings was a man who would become the first Filipino world champion. Indeed, the country's first fighting sensation, Francisco Gallardo, better known as Pancho Villa. And there's Pancho Villa and Jimmy Wald posing before their historic 1923 fight. In 1922, International News Service editor Davis J. Walsh wrote, "Villa is yards faster than any fighter we have seen in an American ring in 10 years. Hits from any angle with rare accuracy and seems to pack a punch for a little man." In 1923, Villa defeated an aging Jimmy Wald and turned the division upside down. But just 2 years later, a surgery complication took Villa's life and left the division with no ruler. Enter Fidel LaBarbera, 1924 Olympic gold medalist. In his first 10 fights as a pro, LaBarbera had faced future welterweight champion Jimmy McLarnin 3 times and Newsboy Brown once, failing to defeat either of them. But the experience he gained, no doubt, aided him in fight number 11, when he captured the vacant world flyweight title by decision over Frankie Gennaro, who himself had bested the late Pancho Villa 3 times. Though flyweight still wasn't much of a glamour division and played second fiddle to the bigger men of the 1920s, it nonetheless produced a heap of drama during that decade, with LaBarbera's short, potent reign a major part of it. And there is LaBarbera. Fidel LaBarbera. Mike Masick in the building. Salute, Mike. Fidel LaBarbera versus William Clark, the fight of the day. And there's Fidel LaBarbera right there. Fighting out of Los Angeles, LaBarbera avoided defeat through 14 fights as champion. Even if he could manage to beat Brown settling for a second draw with him in June 1926, in late 1926. Then came rumblings of another champion, a fighter from Scotland named William Ellie Clark, who challenged the legitimacy of the Barber's crown. Okay? So, following some light verbal sparring through the press, Clark's manager, Charles J. Harvey, got permission to ferry Clark from Scotland to the United States. There remained two concerns. First, most of LaBarber's fights after winning the title were contested at catchweights, and there was doubt he could make the flyweight limit. Plus, the New York State Athletic Commission was reluctant to sanction a LaBarber versus Clark fight, without the latter first proving himself against lower-level American opposition. By mid-November of 1926, at least one of the issues had been resolved, as the president of the National Sporting Club of London, Peg Bettison, stepped forward to vouch for Clark's abilities, allowing the New York State Athletic Commission to sanction the fight. Famed promoter Tex McCord would promote the clash, while Madison Square Garden matchmaker Jess McMahon handled the finer details. And there's a nice shot of Clark right there. William Clark, the challenger from Scotland. Any questions regarding the legitimacy of LaBarber's claim to the world title figured to be confirmed one way or the other with the eagerly anticipated international clash. As Walsh wrote in mid-December, it may be that the meeting of Clark and LaBarber will reclaim some of the stark internationalism that made the matches between George McGovern and Pat Law Palmer, Jim Driscoll and Abe Patel, what they were. That sort of thing reenacted would do boxing no harm. Adding an extra dose of history was a pre-fight report from the Associated Press stating Clark would be the first boxer to use the new transatlantic phone system, as he had scheduled a call to the London Times to give his description of the fight the following morning. The Garden, jammed with 16,000 people, watched as Newsboy Brown earned the decision over Frankie Gennaro in the 10-round co-feature, then waited with surprising anticipation for a fight between two men who weren't even close to being local. Remember, LaBarber was from California, Clark was from Scotland. Fight was in New York, Madison Square Garden. Excitement was for naught, however, as LaBarber handed Clark a decisive beating through 12 rounds. What might have been a hard-fought battle to decide a global undisputed flyweight championship wound up instead marking a violent end to Clark's career. Clark visited the canvas 5 times. Here he is on one of his trips to the canvas right there. 5 times. Wow. Right hands dropped Clark once in the first round and 3 times in the 3rd round, while a left to the body decked him in the 8th round. An AP report read, only his gameness and defensive instinct saved the stoop-shouldered, walloping little invader from a knockout in the face of a steady hail of hooks, jabs, and uppercuts that came from all directions. Editor Walsh remarked, I doubt if the Britisher landed more than 1 clean punch per round. while the left handing he took was a crime. For more years than not, the lineage of the flyweight class has been murky. But in the years after its formal inception, the division offered constant action and change. Following LaBarbera versus Clark, boxing went on without both fighters, as it would have done anyway. LaBarbera vacated the title that fall to attend Stanford University, while the loss aggravated lingering eye injury. The loss aggravated the lingering eye injury for Clark, making it his last fight in his career. Clark's wife didn't fret though, saying she would be happy to see her husband return to his former vocation as a riveter and to play the accordion again, as he had in times past. And there you have it, the fight of the day, won by LaBarbera, ended Clark's career. LaBarbera vacated the title to go to college, went to Stanford University. Okay, so now let's get into, we got 8 fighters we're gonna profile today. It's Profile Friday. We're gonna look at 8 of them today, okay? Starting with Mr. Gunboat Smith himself. Edward Edward Smith is his government name. Gunboat, he was in the Navy. That's where he got his nickname of Gunboat. Okay? Yeah, Al Booker had told me that a while back. Gunboat Smith. He was a Navy man. Okay, and there is Gunboat fighting somebody. That's Gunboat on the right there. In the long tights. Okay, let's take a look at Gunboat. Yeah, we got 8 of them, so it's gonna be like 10, 15 minutes for each fighter. Starting with Gunboat. Edward Gunboat Smith. He was an Irish-American boxer, a film actor, and later a boxing referee. Now, during his career, Smith faced 12 different boxing Hall of Famers, a combined total of 23 times. Among the all-time greats he faced were Jack Dempsey, Harry Greb, Sam Langford, and Georges Carpenter. Because y'all know every time we're talking about some other fighter, Gunboat's name always comes up. And he fought them all: Jack Dempsey, Harry Greb, Sam Langford, and the French fighter, Georges Carpenter. Yeah, Gunboat fought them all. Yes, he did. Edward, yeah, that was his government name, was Edward Smith. Yep. How's everybody? It's Friday, profile day. We got 8 of them today we're gonna go over. Got a good one for you today. People missing out, okay? So let's continue. Now, Gunboat fought at heavyweight his entire career. Fought in the heavyweight division, okay? And he was 6 foot 2 inches tall, had a reach of 72 inches, and he fought in the orthodox stance, okay? And had a total of 90 fights in his career. He won 52, lost 28, he had 10 draws, and he had 38 wins by knockout. Let's look at Gunboat's career now. There's Gunboat on the right again. Squaring off against somebody. I don't know who that is. Just Do Boxing in the building. Salute, Just Do. Yeah, we ought to look at this Friday profile. They had 8 different fighters today, little 10, 15-minute talks about each of them. Starting out with Gunboat Smith, Edward Gunboat Smith. Salute, Just Do. That's Gunboat on the right. Take a look at his career. Now, Gunboat was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He spent much of his youth in orphanages, working on farms and on the railroads. He joined the U.S. Navy, where he began boxing and won the heavyweight championship of the Pacific Fleet. That's where he got his nickname Gunboat, from his Navy career. In 1910, Gunboat became known in the Oakland and San Francisco areas by serving as a sparring partner for Jack Johnson and Stanley Ketchum. Yeah, Jack Johnson, the Galveston Giant, he was a sparring partner for Jack. And Stanley Ketchum. We're going to talk about Stanley today, too. And he sparred with both of them before they fought for the heavyweight title. Author Jack London knew Gunboat and helped fund his training. From 1912 to 1915, Gunboat established himself as the leading candidate for the heavyweight title, beating, among others, British and British Empire champion Bombardier Billy Wells and future world champion Jess Willett. Yeah, Gunboat had to win against Jess Willett, future world champion, and beating and losing to Sam Langford in 2 fights. 2 fights against the Boston Bone Crusher Sam Langford. Was 1-1 with him. Now, Gunboat fought many other great fighters, but before his death, he was asked to name the greatest fighter he ever met. And his response was Sam Langford. He said Sam Langford was the best of all of them that I fought. In 1914, Gunboat won the World White Heavyweight Championship. This title created by boxing promoters due to the unpopularity of the black heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson. So yeah, when Jack Johnson won the official heavyweight title, they started the White Heavyweight Championship. Now, this championship was never widely recognized. Now, Gunboat did win it, though. He lost the title to Georges Carpenter later that year in a fight with a purse of 9,000 pounds sterling, and that was in England. Okay. It is Gunboat again. He'll knock somebody down. Yeah. Gunboat got somebody on the mat. After 1916, Gunboat's career suffered a decline. In 1917, he suffered a loss by decision to future champion Jack Dempsey in a hotly contested 4-round fight. A year later, Gunboat was knocked to the canvas 9 times by Dempsey, suffering a one-sided second-round knockout. In 1920 and 1921, Gunboat suffered a string of knockout losses and retired after suffering a 1-round knockout to the great heavyweight contender, Harry Wills. Now, the Gunboat, they 52 and 28 10 draws. Not a great record on paper, Dave Allen remarked, but one that becomes much more impressive when you take into consideration that he fought the very best of his era. Yeah, Gunboat got one of the best resumes of all time. He got one of them Oscar resumes. Well, Oscar got a Gunboat resume because Gunboat was first. Great resume for Gunboat Smith. Because you all know every time we're talking about a great heavyweight, we always mentioning Gunboat's name for him. Remember? All the time. And he had a great resume. Now, Gunboat was lean and scrappy, an excellent boxer who moved well and hit sharply with both hands. Among the men he defeated were Jess Willett, Sam Langford, Harry Wills, Battling Levinsky, Carl Morris, Frank Moran, and Fireman Jim Flynn. He put all the big names of his era. Gunboat did. So, and he was an actor too after retirement. Let's talk briefly about retirement after he retired. Gunboat. Mr. Gunboat, Edward Gunboat Smith. There's Gunboat. Good shot of Gunboat right there. Okay, after boxing for Gunboat. After his retirement, Gunboat went on to have a variety of jobs. Runner on Wall Street, private policeman at Madison Square Garden and Yankee Stadium, and an actor in several small roles in silent films, including The Great Gatsby and Wings. The first Academy Award winner for Best Picture. Yeah, Wings was the first picture to ever win an Academy Award when they first started it back in the day. Gunboat was in that. Okay? Yeah. Gunboat also refereed boxing. He also refereed fights. Some big ones, such as the Harry Graham versus Tiger Flowers middleweight championship fight in 1926 and the controversial Max Schmeling versus Jack Sharkey rematch heavyweight championship in 1932. Gunboat died in 1974 in Florida. Edward Gunboat Smith. Yep, one of the best resumes of all time. Okay, we're going to talk about 8 fighters today for the profile. As promised, we started it out with Gunboat. Next is going to be Abe Attell. Okay, he had he was good friends with the old master Joe Gans. Fought him. Talk about Abe Attell. Everybody ready for the weekend? It's upon us. These weeks going by like days, man. Wow. Can't believe it's Friday already. And then Monday, Trilogy Monday, we're going to do the 4-fight series between Juan Manuel Marquez and Manny Pacquiao this week. Yeah, it's going to be a 4-fight series this week. The Manny Pacquiao, Juan Manuel Marquez situation. We're going to take a look at those 4 fights. Coming up, start the week off next week. It'll be here before you know it. All right. Boxing legend, Abe Attell, the Little Hebrew. That's what they call him, the Little Hebrew. Yeah, we're going to cover 8 fighters today for the profile. Now, the Little Hebrew, Abe Attell. We were Jews living in an Irish neighborhood. You can guess the rest, said Abe. I used to fight 4-5 times every day. Abraham Abe Attell, aka the Little Hebrew, was born in San Francisco, California in 1884 to a poor family whose patriarch deserted him when Abe was just 13 years old. To help put food on the table, young Abe sold newspapers at various street corners. And on one of those corners he located the famous Mechanics Pavilion. One of those corners he sold papers on was the famous Mechanics Pavilion, an historic venue which frequently hosted high-profile fights, boxing fights. After happening to witness the featherweight title fight between the legendary George Little Chocolate Dixon and Solly Smith in 1897, Abe decided that the ring was calling him, and he would try his luck as a prize fighter. Doing so involved obvious risk, but Abe saw the chance to make far more money fighting than he ever could, selling newspapers. So Abe decided to get into the boxing ring. Yeah, this famous boxing venue was on this corner, one of these corners he sold papers at. And he saw a couple of fights, and he saw this one between George Dixon, Little Chocolate, and Solly Smith, and decided that's what he wanted to do. And Abe won the championship at the age of 17. There he is right there. 17 years old, won his first title. Talk about it. Now, Abe wasn't the only one in his family to choose pugilism as a profession, as his brothers, Monty and Caesar, made the same career choice. Now, their decision to apply their trade in the ring proved a good one, as Abe and Monty would later become the first brothers to hold world titles simultaneously. Okay? Yeah, Abe and his brother Monty. First brothers to hold titles at the same time. Now, Abe's career got underway in 1900, and from the outset, he was successful, knocking out all but one of his opponents in his first full year of fighting. When I started, I was only 16, recalled Abe years later, and I thought that the easy way was to knock him out. I was a conceited fighter. I thought I could lick anybody. And for a long time, I was right. Yeah, Abe was beating everybody. But Abe later transformed his style to one more cerebral and technical by emulating James J. Corbett and George Dixon, two of pugilism's early scientific practitioners. Instead of looking for the knockout, Abe began to weave defense and footwork into his game, making him a much more versatile and unpredictable combatant. The light dawned, recollected Abe. A fella could be a prize fighter and not get hurt, provided he was smart enough. I learned that lesson way back in 1900, and I remembered it until I quit boxing in 1915. And during that 15-year stretch, Abe built a legacy as one of the greatest featherweights to ever step through the ropes into the squared circle. Just 9 months after Abe's career commenced, he faced the man who had inspired him to become a fighter, taking on the great Little Chocolate, George Dixon, in Denver, Colorado, in only his 16th pro fight. The relative novice held Dixon to a draw, and a rematch 2 months after yielded the same result. But a week later, Attell, who was still 4 months shy of his 18th birthday, battled Dixon a third time and won by a 15-round decision to claim the world featherweight title. But remember yesterday now, we said 90% of George Dixon's draws and losses were really wins. There's a lot of racism going on back then. And I doubt if young Abe, as young as he was in that first fight, I doubt if that was really a draw. Okay? Just a little side note. Dixon probably really won that fight, but this historian said 90% of his losses and draws were really wins. Not to diminish Abe, Okay, there's Abe again, fighting someone. That's Abe on the right there throwing the punch. Yeah. Yep. Okay, let's continue. However, in the early 20th century, it was not uncommon for several fighters to simultaneously claim to be the rightful champion in a given division. It was not until 1906, when Attell squared off with Jimmy Walsh, that the undisputed world featherweight championship was at stake. But in the interim, Attell had been very active, as top pros always were in those days. Between his win over Dixon and his showdown with Walsh, Abe had answered the bell more than 40 times in the process, facing such formidable battlers as Aurelio Herrera, Tommy Sullivan, and Battling Nelson. Yeah, Battling Nelson was the guy we talked about yesterday, the dirty fighter that fought the old master Joe Gaz and got disqualified in the 42nd round, remember? So Attell wasn't about to let his chance at total featherweight supremacy slip away, as, according to the Los Angeles Times, he played with Walsh as a cat with a mouse. And when he got through with the milling at the conclusion of the 15th round, he did not have a mark on him and was good for many more rounds. Now, while the exact number of title defenses registered during Abe's lengthy reign as featherweight king varies depending on the source, what can never be questioned is the fact he was a fighting champion and always willing to test his elite skills against the fiercest competitors available. In his prime, the Little Hebrew defeated a host of truly excellent pugilists, including all-time greats like Pete Herman, Owen Moran, Tommy Sullivan, and Johnny Kilbane. But Attell was not content with conquering all the available competition in his weight class. In search of more daunting challenges, he regularly moved up to lightweight to take on the top contenders there, including Ed Wolgast, Battling Nelson, Jim Driscoll, and Freddie Welch, all of whom are enshrined in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. That he was willing to prove himself against the best, regardless of weight, demonstrates Abe Attell's fearlessness and why he is rightfully recognized as one of the finest ringmen of all time. There's Abe, and him on the right again, and Owen Moran. Well, that's Abe on the left, excuse me. He poses with fellow great Owen Moran. Prior to one of their 5 fights, he fought Owen Moran 5 times. As famed fight scribe Lester Bromberg wrote, Attell's natural weight was 117, but he gloried in being small. There were instances when he gave away as much as 20 pounds, but he liked being the little champ. To him, there was added honor to that. Legendary boxing promoter Tex Rickard had stated that Abe Attell was the greatest boxer he had ever seen. Author Alan Bardner asserts Attell is second only to the legendary Benny Leonard in the pantheon of great Jewish boxers. No serious list of the all-time best featherweights can omit his name, and most put him in the top 5, shoulder to shoulder with fellow immortals Willie Pep and Henry Armstrong. However, by 1912, the frenetic pace of Attell's career had caught up to him, and he lost his world title by decision in a rematch with Johnny Kilbane. A report from the Los Angeles Herald states that Attell did not put up his usual classy exhibition and failed to show within 50% of the same great boxer who so frequently had a draw with Owen Moran and defeated Ed Wolgast and other great fighters. There he is with Johnny Kilbane before their 1912 fight. Okay, that's Abe on the left. Yeah, him and Johnny Kilbane posing before their fight in 1912. Notably, during round 16 of this fight with Kilbane, the referee had to wipe an unknown substance from Attell's body. Kilbane insisted it was chloroform intended to make him groggy. Attell refuted the accusation, insisting the substance was cocoa butter. Regardless of the veracity of Kilbane's accusation, this was far from the only time Attell was suspected of bending the rules. The fact is, the tale of the little Hebrew cannot be complete before mentioning his shady side. At one point, the New York State Athletic Commission even banned Attell from competing for 6 months because he had barely put forth an offensive effort against one Valentine Bronheim, aka Knockout Brown. This was in January of 1912. Now, Attell's reputation preceded him, and his reluctance to fight convinced all that the fix was it. Abe insisted that his performance was affected by an injury to his thumb, for which cocaine had been injected. But years later, he admitted not always giving forth his best effort for the purpose of securing a bigger payday in a rematch. Okay? He said sometimes he held back so he could get the rematch and get a bigger payday. Wow. Man, excuse me, I'm trying to scroll up. There we go. Thing would move. It is the little Hebrew right there. But of course, the most nefarious scheme in which Attell was allegedly involved came after his career had ended in 1917. As a member of gangster Arnold Rothstein's entourage, Abe was accused of helping to facilitate one of the biggest scandals in sports history, the famous Black Sox scandal of 1919, when 8 players on the Chicago White Sox baseball team allegedly threw the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. Now, Attell was never brought to trial, as he managed to convince a New York jury that it was all a case of mistaken identity, and that he was not the same Abe Attell that the Chicago grand jury was after, yet the grand jury didn't indict him. But even if he was never convicted, the mere association adds another black mark to Attell's reputation, because he did associate with the mafia figure, with this mafia figure, Arnold Rothstein. And he was good friends with the old master. They used to spar together, and they all spawned right there. They used to spar together and everything, him and Joe Gans. They were very good friends. Yeah. Now, eventually, Abe put the scandal behind him and settled down, opening a popular tavern in New York's East Side. And he never strayed too far from his sport of choice, often attending fight cards at Madison Square Garden. Now, Abe would spend his final years in a nursery home before passing away at age 85 in 1970. Despite all of Attell's antics and the accusations that followed his career, nothing can overshadow his undeniable ring greatness and accomplishments. Abe Attell, a true ring legend, built a boxing legacy that will forever stand the test of time. Having competed in over 150 pro fights, not bad for a poor Jewish kid who used to sell papers on the corner just to get by. Okay, Abe Attell. Yeah, that's our second. We got 8 fighters we're going to profile today. Little 10, 15-minute talks about each of them. Okay? Next is going to be Joe Choinski. Joe Choinski. I believe that's Joe right. Yeah, that's Joe right there. Joe Choinski is our next profilee, right? That's the word, right? Profilee. Yeah. Joseph Choinski is next. Okay, let's get this thing going. Here we go. There's Joe's. Right there. All right. Love it when a plan comes together. There we go. Yeah, that's Joe up there on the screen. Joseph Chornsky is next. Okay. Joe Chornsky, the murderous puncher who knocked out Jack Johnson and then taught him how to box. Yeah, early in his career. Knocked the Galveston Giant out, then taught him how to box. Let's talk about it. Let's see what happened with that, because I never knew that before, like yesterday. Talk about that. Now, as fight fans know, precious few boxers ever managed to knock out the great Jack Johnson. The Galveston Giant was a magnificent fighter, way ahead of his time, and the first black heavyweight king ruled the world for 7 years before age and Jess Willard caught up with him. But on the way up, in what was just his 11th pro fight, a 22-year-old Johnson was knocked out in the third round by Joe Chornsky. The Jewish fighter, who stood around 5'10" and weighed in at approximately 170 pounds, is revered by many historians as one of the most utterly destructive punchers who ever put on gloves. The Chornsky story is a fascinating one, as is the Chornsky-Johnson tale. Now, Chornsky, born in San Francisco in November of 1868, began his amateur boxing career in 1884, and he soon began displaying what can only be described as paralyzing power. Indeed, this is the description Johnson chose when speaking to a boxing writer about Chornsky in 1940. Chornsky, who was 32 years old and was sporting a 52-win, 11-loss, and 6-draw pro record when he fought Johnson in Jack's hometown of Galveston, Texas, in February of 1901, had been in the ring with such luminaries as James J. Corbett, George Godfrey, Bob Fitzsimmons, Tom Sharkey, James J. Jeffries, Charles Kidd McCoy, and Barbados Joe Walcott. He took Johnson out with a brutal left hook to the head in the third round. Chornsky, who gave each man he faced sheer hell due to his uncommon punching power, this, whether he was victorious or not, routinely faced men who were much bigger and heavier than he was. Now, the fights Chornsky had with Jeffries, Fitzsimmons, and Corbett are legendary, with all three men having to take real punishment due to having tangled with Joe. Okay? Here's what former heavyweight champion James J. Jeffries said about Chornsky years after they had fought. Years after they had fought to bear with me for a minute. Anyway, they fought to a draw. To this day, I can't figure out how a runt like him could hurt so damn bad, Jeffrey said of Chornsky, who he outweighed by 50 pounds. During our scrap, he clipped me with a right that landed high on my cheekbone. I figured my whole face was caved in, and when I tried to feel what was left with my hands, there wasn't any sensation at all. That was the hardest punch I ever took, and had it landed a little lower, I would have been knocked out for the first time in my life. Okay, that's what James J. Jeffries said about Joe Chornsky. Fellow former heavyweight champ James Corbett, who fought Chornsky 3 times, had this to say about his incredible punching power. Little Joe was the hardest hitter I ever struggled with, Corbett said years after the 3 fights he had with the California Terror. 3-weight world champion Bob Fitzsimmons said the same when recalling the hardest hitter he ever faced. And it was a young, still raw Jack Johnson that would wind up being blasted out by Chornsky in 1901. The fight listed as an exhibition due to the fact that boxing was illegal in Texas at the time, nevertheless attracted the attention of the police. After the fight, both Chorsky and Johnson were arrested and jailed for 2 weeks. During this time, Chorsky taught Johnson, with whom he had grown friendly, many tricks of the trade. In fact, Johnson spoke about how much he learned from Chorsky. This in an interview that was conducted after he had retired. Chorsky had told his cellmate that a clever mover such as Johnson should never have to take a punch. And Johnson recalled how he and Chorsky would spar, with him soaking up all the knowledge Joe was willing to share with him. Joe developed a great liking for me, Johnson said. Every day we would box in the jail yard, surrounded by police officers and guests. I learned more in those 2 weeks than I had learned in my entire existence up to that point. Johnson would in time go on to become a great fighter, a defensive master who could hit with real authority himself. Chorsky, who never got a shot at the world heavyweight title, went on to fight 12 more times after leveling Johnson, with him retiring with a 59 wins, 17 losses, 6 draws, 4 no contests, 39 knockouts. He retired in November of 1904. Here's what Chorsky's former opponent turned pupil said in regards to the hardest puncher he ever faced. This is Jack Johnson talking about Chorsky. Jack said, "Jeffries #1? No, sir. Give me Joe Chorsky anytime." Johnson said, "I faced both, Jeffries and Chorsky, so I should know." Now, Jeffries had a powerful wallet, but Chorsky's punch was paralyzing. His left hand was a corker. He was the hardest puncher in the last 50 years, with Joe Walcott a close second. Barbados Joe, that is, not Jersey. This is Johnson still talking about Chorsky. He said, "I think Chorsky's left hook was even more effective than Jack Dempsey's. Chorsky could paralyze you, even if he didn't catch you flush." Okay? Chorsky, who was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1998, passed away in Cincinnati, Ohio, January 1943, at age 74. Joe Chorsky, okay? Next is the Michigan Assassin, Stanley Ketchel. That was him on the thumbnail. There's Stanley. The Michigan Assassin, Stanley Ketchel. Profiling 8 fighters today. On Friday, this is profile day. Yeah, we're going to look at 8 different guys today. We're going to get them into. Next is Stanley Ketchel, the Michigan Assassin. And Stanley's career was cut short. He was murdered. He was just 24 years old. Boxing career still going on. Yep. Just imagine how good he could have been. I think he might still be in the Hall of Fame, but let's talk about it. Let's see. Stanley Ketchel. So how great was Stanley Ketchel? Stanley Ketchel, who was born to Polish immigrants in Grand Rapids, Michigan on September 14th, 1886, was seemingly born tough. These days, young men and women have a choice when it comes to fighting in the ring for a living or not doing so. Back when warriors like Stanley Ketchel were in their teenage years, there were not too many options open to them. Ketchel's formative years were harder than hard. Avoiding school and preferring to run with a gang, Ketchel ran away from home at the age of just 12, becoming a hobo. Growing up in Butte, Montana, Ketchel later found work as a bouncer. He then fought in backroom booths, daring any man to challenge him, fighting with $20 on the line. Ketchel was on the way to earning a living from real fighting. Today, Ketchel is rightfully revered as one of the absolute greats. Ned Fleischer found a Ring magazine called Ketchel the greatest middleweight ever. Most famous for his ring battles with Billy Papke, Philadelphia, Jack O'Brien, and Jack Johnson. Ketchel compiled an astonishing 51 wins, 7 losses, 3 draws, pro record, 46 knockouts. Okay. For a knockout ratio, I don't know why I always do this. 46 knockouts and 51 wins, 90%, 90.1% for the Michigan Assassin knockout ratio. So he was punching like that. All this by the time he was just 24 years old, okay? 61 fights by the time he was just 24 years of age. Now, Ketchel was, as history informs us, killed at age 24, shot in the back by a man named Walter Dipley, who flew into a jealous rage over a woman. He flew into a jealous rage over a woman and shot Ketchel in the back. And then Ketchel bled to death on the scene before he could get to a hospital or anything. Then in the ring, Ketchel was fearless, going pro in May of 1903, 16 years old. He moved to California in 1907, looking for the big fights. Ketchel fought at an incredible pace, with him having 13 fights in 1904 and an insane 18 fights in 1905. The 5'7" two-fisted, rock-chin Ketchel would fight anyone, 160-pound middleweight division. He defeated Joe Thomas over 20 rounds to win the vacant world middleweight title. This after battling to an earlier 20-round draw, one that was followed by a 32-round knockout win in the rematch with Thomas. Okay? Now, the title win was in December of 1907, and then in February of 1908, Ketchel defeated Mike Twin Sullivan to become the universally recognized world middleweight ruler. This by a first-round knockout. Ketchel then engaged in his fiercer than fierce rivalry with Billy Papke. 4 times these two warriors raged at one another, with the X-rated violence reaching nothing short of epic proportions. Ketchel won the first fight by non-title decision. Papke knocked Ketchel out in the 12th round of the rematch, taking the title. And then the Michigan Assassin won fights 3 and 4. Ketchel administering such a beating to Papke in fight 3, won by knockout in round 11, that Papke's own wife was unable to recognize him after the fight. That's how bad Papke beat him. This man's wife couldn't even recognize him after the fight. Okay? Wow. These two Iron Men took turns dishing out and taking sickening amounts of punishment during a time when pro fighters really were a different breed. Poverty and unimaginably hard times driving them on. After the third fight with Papke, Ketchel fought former light heavyweight champ Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. Ketchel took a real beating in the early rounds, only to come roaring back to score no less than 4 knockdowns over the course of rounds 9 and 10. O'Brien was knocked flat at the end of the 10th round, yet the bell had gone, and he was saved by the bell, the fight being declared a no decision. In a return fight, Ketchel knocked O'Brien out in the 3rd round. Then, in October of 1909, in arguably his most famous fight, Ketchel fought reigning heavyweight champion Jack Johnson, the Galveston Giant. The two are said to have agreed to fight 20 rounds, with each man following the carefully devised script. But Ketchel double-crossed Johnson in round 12, belting him with a savage right hand that dropped the heavyweight champion. Johnson, whose account of the fight is the one people go by, seeing as how Ketchel was dead just a year later, then got up, smiling, before making Ketchel pay for his sneak attack. Johnson is said to have ripped several teeth from Ketchel's mouth, leaving him flat out unconscious for some minutes. And later after the fight, they found Ketchel's teeth embedded in Johnson's glove, okay? Now, Ketchel moved on after that fight, and after losing a decision to Frank Claus, he faced the legendary Sam Langford in April of 1910. The two boxing 6 rounds. Now, reports vary, but most say Langford was too good for Ketchel. Certainly, Langford won the decision. Many fighters at the time avoided Langford like the plague. There was talk of a rematch, yet it never happened. Yet Ketchel was one of the few fighters willing to face Langford. Okay, never had the rematch though. I don't know what happened to the rematch. But Langford won the decision in that one. Ketchel had just 3 further fights after that, all of them knockout wins, with Porky Flynn, Willie Lewis, and on June 10th, 1910, Jim Smith being knocked out. 4 months after the Smith fight, Ketchel was murdered. He was still a world middleweight champion when he was murdered. Ketchel is buried in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was enshrined in the International Boxing Hall of Fame in the inaugural year in the old timers category, 1990. So how great was Ketchel? For some, Ketchel ranks as the greatest middleweight of all time. For sure, he has to be in the top 5. The Michigan assassin, Stanley Ketchel, okay? Profiling 8 great fighters today from 1900 to 1950. Next is the great Barney Ross. The great Barney Ross. Okay, Barney Ross is next. We had a good one today. If only people knew. Okay, let's get the great Barney Ross up here now. Okay, we still got Tony Zell, Chalky Wright, Rocky Graciano. Who else? We're gonna get them in too. We got Chalky Wright, Tony Zell, the great Rocky Graciano to go. Okay. In time permitting, we're gonna do Billy Conn. We're gonna look at who was the greatest fighter between 1900 and 1950. Big show today. Big show today. Okay, the great Barney Ross is next. We're definitely gonna get the 8 in. This is number 5. No, this is number 6 right here. No, or did I miss somebody? This is number 6. Yeah. No, this is number 5. This is number 5. That's right. Okay. Okay, let's talk about Barney Ross. Now, Barney Ross, a friend for life. Now, Barney Ross was born in the Lower East Side of New York, December 23rd, 1909. Barnett David Rosofsky. Now, Barnett grew up in Chicago, dreaming of being a Talmudic scholar, and Hebrew teacher. Now, those dreams would come crashing down when at age 14, 2 men shot and killed his father while robbing the family store. Okay? That event would ultimately link Barnett with elements in the underworld that would haunt him throughout his life. As was the norm for many Jewish fighters at the time, Barnett took another name, Barney Ross, so he could hide his boxing from family and to get more fights. Okay? He would also use the name Barney Rossoff at times during his life, with the ring name Barney Ross. Now, Barney's mother, distressed and depressed by her husband's death, would suffer a nervous breakdown, forcing the family to be divided, sending Barney and his brother Maury to live with family, his 3 younger siblings into an orphanage. At this time, Barney, angry at a God that could allow this to happen to his family, turned to the streets. It was in those streets that he would join first the Miller, then the Capone crime families. It was at this time that Barney would befriend one Jack Sparky Rubenstein. Sparky and Barney had common interests and common problems. Both men's mothers had suffered breakdown. Both needed to survive the harsh world of gangland Chicago. Jack had been through the foster system with his siblings after the split of his parents, same as Barney's siblings. Barney needed funds to reunite the family and support them. Both Sparky and Barney would run errands for Al Capone, the gangster. Al Capone, y'all heard of Al Capone, right? Yeah, Barney and his buddy would run errands for him to get money. Barney was trying to get his family back together, right? Now, Al Capone's brothers, Ralph and Matty Capone, Frank Nitti, Murray Humphreys, Tough Tony Capizio, and Machine Gun Sam Hunt, all gangsters, were close followers of Barney's, often sponsoring his amateur career. And present, and they was always there when he turned pro at his fights and stuff, right? Now Ross also said in an interview that Sparky too was almost always present when he fought, both as an amateur and as a professional. When Ross began his career, he trained at the Kit Howard Gym in the Loop area of Chicago. Al Capone would often purchase all the tickets for the gym, giving them away to the fans that supported Barney. The gym had 125 seats at the cost of $0.25 apiece. Big money during that time, early 1900s, approaching the 1920s. Now, Sparky followed all Barney's fights. Even his old friend Sparky followed all Barney's fights, even his out-of-town championship fights. The pride of the ghetto, Ross would start his pro career in 1929, winning his first title against Tony Canzonieri in Chicago in 1933. Yeah, his nickname was one of the great ones, the Ghetto Wizard. Barney Ross, the Ghetto Wizard, okay? First title was against Tony Canzonieri in 1933. In total, Barney would earn 3 belts in 3 different weight classes. In his last fight, he lost to another Hall of Fame fighter, Homicide Hank, Henry Armstrong, in 1938. That's a famous fight there, too. We're going to get that in one of these fights of the day, maybe Monday. But yeah, he lost in his last fight to Henry Armstrong in 1938. And earlier in the 30s, his mother had talked him out of boxing. But then when the Depression came around, Barney went back into boxing for money. Okay. In 1934, Ring Magazine voted Barney the Fighter of the Year. And when fighting in California, Sparky and Barney would often get together, according to Jack's sister, Eva, and his brother, Hyman. Jack was Sparky's real name, his buddy. In 1942, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and at the age of 33, Barney and Sparky parted company when Barney joined the Marines. During his participation in the invasion of Guadalcanal, Barney would receive wounds that would pain him for life. While on patrol November 20th, 1942, he and his attachment ran into an advance party of Japanese. While most of his patrol was wounded, Barney attacked alone for 12 hours. Using up his own ammunition, he fought with ammo left from the wounded. For this act, he was awarded a Silver Star, Purple Heart, and a Presidential Citation. He also was among 3,200 Fleet Marines to suffer from malaria on Guadalcanal. His fever was nursed by Chaplain Frederick Gary, forever known as the Padre of Guadalcanal. 9 days after the attack on Barney, General Vandergrift would receive orders to send the 1st Marine Division to Australia for rehabilitation. Father Gehring passed away in April of 1998 at age 95. A lifetime friend of Barney's, after their meeting in Guadalcanal, Father Gehring often retold the tale of Christmas Day 1942. The Christmas Mass, that Father Gehring said in a rain of shells from the Japanese, to a group of soldiers. Before an altar and cross made of shell casings, a man played a little reed organ during Christmas carol. He was an Orthodox Jew named Barney Ross. Father Gehring would recall, at the end of the Mass, Barney said, "I'm going to play something for your mother and my mother, wondering where we are tonight." Everybody was nearly in tears. At some time, Barney had made his peace with his God, and during his tour in the Pacific, he would celebrate the Seder during Passover broadcast over the Armed Forces radio frequency. During his evacuation for treatment of his wounds, he was treated with morphine. Overzealous medics, hoping to ease his hurt, ultimately would cause his addiction. Ross would eventually need drug treatment and enter the hospital. It wasn't Sparky or the Crime Foundation of Chicago provided drugs for a habit of over $500 a week. We don't have concrete information. But Ross kicked the habit, even though Hollywood would assault him in creating the movie Monkey on My Back. Though Ross filed suit for much more, he settled for $10,000. Yeah, Hollywood always got to make the story that fit their narrative, you know. Barney reportedly attempted to provide arms in 1948 to Israel as the state struggled with Egypt over a Jewish homeland. We don't know if he was successful. It is reported he was not, or Sparky was involved in making the connections for the arms Barney was trying to find. Years later, guns and arms will be part of both their lives. In February 1944, Sparky would earn a sharpshooter's rating for his firing of an M130 caliber carbine. After attaining the rank of PFC and receiving a Good Conduct Medal, Sparky was honorably discharged from the service. Barney would state in later years that Sparky idolized him and that he was well behaved, never a troublemaker, and would avoid clashes if at all possible. Sparky was tough and often sparred with Barney. Others report that Jack had a lightning-like temper, which may have been where he got the nickname Sparky. Sister Eve thought the nickname came from a comic strip of a slow-moving horse named Sparkplug. They would hang together as adults in the Lawndale restaurant and pool hall. Sparky later moved to Dallas and Barney to New York, where he worked at Milton Blackstone's advertising agency. Over 10 to 12 years while Sparky was in Dallas, they talked often by phone. What many boxing historians leave out is that Barney's friend Jack Sparky Rubenstein was none other than Jack Ruby. Remember the man that supposedly shot President Kennedy? Yep. His best friend Sparky, all these years we were just talking about, was Jack Ruby. Know y'all heard of Jack Ruby? Yep. Barney Ross underwent several interviews with the FBI, testified to the Warren Commission, and even appeared as a character witness for Jack Ruby. Anyone who reads the FBI interviews will see that, though Jack and Barney were friends, Barney attempted to distance himself from his friendship, but could not abandon Jack in the end. To the extent that he did not come totally clean to the FBI about their relationship, in his first statement to agents. And while Ruby was suspected of being involved in he didn't shoot Kennedy, he shot Lee Harvey Oswald, the man that shot Kennedy, remember Jack Ruby. But that was one of Barney's best friends from a young age, right? Now, Barney was suspected in the late 40s, the early 50s, of trying to run arms to Israel. He told the FBI in the statements on June 4th, 1964, that even though he stated in his autobiography that he worked for Al Capone, he never really worked for Capone. Later in the testimony, he contradicts himself, stating that he was given envelopes to deliver by Capone for money. Others who ran such errands were Jack Ruby, Ira Collins, and Lou Capel. Barney believed that the envelopes were empty, a way for Capone to give them money while making them think they were working for it. Usually, the pay was $1. Both Barney Ross and Jack Ruby suffered from and died of cancer. Ruby died in jail, incarcerated while awaiting his trial for the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald. Both gentlemen are buried in Chicago. Barney Ross was a legend in the ring, a survivor of the streets of Chicago. Drug addiction, malaria, fighting as Marine on Guadalcanal, a hero in the struggle for a Jewish state, and despite all of the publicity surrounding the assassination of both Kennedy and Oswald, a friend of Jack Ruby's for life. No movie script compares to his life. From Capone to Guadalcanal to Jack Ruby, Barney Ross endured and overcame. Okay, Barney Ross. Wow, isn't that something? Remember we was talking about the Sparky from early in the story, his best friend. Turned out to be that was Jack Ruby, the man that shot President John F. Kennedy. Arnie Boxing in the building. What's up, Arnie Boxing? Profile Friday. We're looking at 8 different boxes today. That was Barney Ross right there. Amazing story. I thought that was. That's why I had to put that one in there. Yeah. Okay. 3 more to go. Next is Chalky Wright. Taking a 10-15 minute look at 8 different boxes today. Next is Chalky Wright. Okay. All these fighters fought between 1900 and 1950. Time permitting, we're going to look at the best boxing between 1900 and 1950. And it wasn't Sugar Ray Robinson. Mm-hmm. It's subjective, it's not no kind of objective thing. It's, But yeah, Chalky Wright is next. The next profile lead for today, Profile Friday. Okay. Oh man, I didn't even put Barney up there. Damn, I'm sorry. There's Barney. Wow, I didn't even change it. There's Barney Ross. And there's Chalky Wright. There's Chalky. I had Stanley Ketcher, the previous profile, up the whole time that we was doing Barney. My bad. But that's Chalky Wright right there. Kind of looked like, I thought it was Elmer Griffith, but that's Chalky. Yeah, him and Elmer Griffith favors a lot. But that's Chalky Wright. Okay. Let's see. Come on, Chalky. The great ring career and the sad, curious death of featherweight champion Chalky Wright. Now, known to the old timers as one of the hardest punchers of the featherweight division, former world champion Albert Chalky Wright had an amazing ring career, and he sure lived a fascinating life, while his sad death at the age of just 45 makes for very curious reading. Here's his boxing career. Now, Wright, who was ranked in 2003 by Ring Magazine as the number 95 greatest puncher of all time, was born in Wilcox, Arizona on February 1st, 1912. And he was one of 7 children. Wright's grandfather, Caleb Baines Martin, was a runaway slave from Mississippi who escaped his ghastly existence ahead of the Civil War, with Martin going on to establish a ranch in Arizona, thus becoming the first Black American ranch owner in Southwest Arizona. Now, Chalky Wright's father was born in Mexico, while his mother, who was deserted by her husband shortly after Wright was born, moved the family to California around 1918. It was there that Chalky discovered and fell in love with boxing. Tall for his weight, Wright began boxing at the age of 16 and had his pro debut in February of 1928. Wright boxed most of his early fights in San Bernardino, California, and it proved to be a bumpy ride. By February of 1931, after a mere 3 years as a pro fighter, Wright had an astonishing, this is 3 years now, listen to his record, after 3 years. 35 wins, 12 losses, 9 draws. That's 56 fights in 3 years, okay? That's like 15 fights, like 15, 16 fights a year. Okay, let's see, what is that? 56 fights in 3 years. Incredible, right? That's an average of 18 fights per year, okay? First 3 years as a pro. 35 wins, 12 losses, 9 draws. So you can see how the sport has changed ever so drastically over the years. That was the norm. Everybody didn't have quite 56 in 3 years, but that was the norm. Most people had 25, 30 fights over like a 3-year period. Like Harry Greb fought 45 times in 1 year. He had almost 100 fights in like 3 years. He fought 37 in 1917, 45 in 1919. So he probably had 100. You know, he probably fought at least 20 in 1918. But back to talking, yeah, 3 years had, what did I say, 51 fights? 56 fights in 3 years. Now, Wright, though, was full of heart, spirit, and sheer enthusiasm. In 1938, by which time Wright had fought top names such as Baby Arizmendi twice and Freddie Miller, he lost all 3 fights. He was knocked out by the great homicide Hank Henry Armstrong. But Armstrong was impressed with Wright's ability, and he took him on as a sparring partner. Later, Armstrong's manager, Eddie Walker, signed Wright, and his career began to blossom after that. He became a stablemate of Henry Armstrong's. His career began to blossom, you know, sparring with Homicide Hank and everything. You can't help but get better, you know. Iron sharpens iron. Soon enough, Wright, who would register 87 knockouts in total, was moving up the ranks. By the summer of 1941, Wright, now age 29, was 127 wins, 29 losses, and 17 draws. And he had picked up excellent wins over the likes of Sal Bartolo and Jackie Wilson. And then, finally, after having fought for over 13 years, Wright got his first crack at the world title. Okay? Challenging Joey Archibald in September of that year, Wright scored an 11th round knockout in Washington, D.C. Wright would actually lose his very next fight. This is a non-title fight with Joey Peralta, who decisioned him. In total, Wright would register just 2 title retentions, with him losing other non-title fights as well. He defeated Harry Jeffries, 10th round knockout, and Lulu Constantino, 15-round decision, before he lost the title to the great Willie Pep. Now, Pep won a unanimous decision over Wright in November of 1942 at Madison Square Garden. And the two would fight 4 times in total, with Pep winning all 4. Okay? Willie beat him 4 out of 4. But there ain't nothing to hang your head about. That's the great Willie Pep. Top 5 all time, right? Now, Wright attempted to win back the crown against Pep in their September 1944 rematch, but he was again beaten on points. In the 4th and final fight in November of 1946, Pep knocked Wright out in 3 rounds, showing how faded Wright had become, because you get knocked out by Willie Pep. Yeah, Willie Pep wasn't really known as a knockout fighter. So this showed how faded Wright had become. And by this time, Wright aged 35, and he had a record of hard-earned record, 171 wins, 44 losses, 18 draws. He had been in plenty of tough fights, too. Among the other big names Wright faced during his later career were Jackie Wilson, again, he had already fought him twice, remember, and Johnny Brett. In March of 1948, after a stoppage loss against Ernie Hunick, Wright retired. He was now 36 years old, and he left boxing with a record of 171 wins, 46 losses, 19 draws, right? 87 by way of knockout. So he had a career of 171 plus. Where is it at, man? I just read it. Oh, 46 plus. Why do I do this? Why did I just keep 19 draws? A total of 236 fights for Chalky Wright. Wow. Okay, 87 by the way of knockout. Wright undertook plenty of different projects after he retired. He worked as a trainer for lightweight contender Tommy Campbell, while somewhat mysteriously, and a big element of mystery is certainly there when it comes to the end of the former champion's life, right? Wright claimed he had written his autobiography, but under the pen name Jay Cardwell. To this day, the book has never surfaced. Nobody had never seen this autobiography. And let's talk about the tragic death of Chalky Wright. He said he wrote an autobiography, but nobody had never seen it to this day in 2025. Let's talk about the tragic death of Chalky Wright now. Wright, who had unfortunately lost almost all of his ring earnings while gambling, also worked in a bar where he claimed each and every woman was a former fighter. And at the end, he worked in a bakery. Now, Wright was married twice, and he had one son who passed away some time ago. Now, the manner in which Wright died is both sad and mysterious. In 1930, Wright became friendly with star actress Mae West. West was actually a boxing fan. Yeah, I heard that before. Mae West was actually a boxing fan, and she reportedly helped finance Wright's early ring career. It is said the two became more than friends, but this was never proven. Said they was doing a little hanky-panky, but it was never proven. In actuality, the subject became something of a scandal and may have led to Wright's death, even his murder. Years later, in 1955, when Wright had long since retired from boxing, a tabloid magazine called Confidential ran an exposed story that stated how West and Wright had been lovers, and that West had given Wright a good deal of money with which to gamble. The article described how West and a bronze boxer became romantic, talking about Wright, the bronze boxer. Now, West denied the claim, while she also sued for libel. West won, but later in 1957, the case went to court as the writers for Confidential were ordered to testify regarding the underhanded tactics they were used when it came to putting out stories. Before he was called to testify, Wright suddenly died at the age of just 45. Wright, who had been diagnosed with a heart condition and had been hospitalized that July, was found dead in his mother's bathtub on August 12th, just before he was due in court. Right? So that was, what year was that? 1957. Yeah. Just before he was due in court, he was found dead in his mother's bathtub, right? Wright's head was under the water, and the tap was still running. Immediately, there were suggestions of foul play, the motive being to silence Wright before his day in court. These claims were bolstered by the fact that Wright's first wife, who was also set to testify in court, stated how she had received a threatening phone call during which an unknown person with a rough voice told her to keep her mouth shut if you know what's good for you. So, was Wright murdered? Though we will never know for sure, there is some evidence that suggests the former fighter in ill health really slipped and hit his head, with there reportedly being proof by way of a dislodged towel rack that Wright had grabbed in order to try and stop himself from falling at the time of the unfortunate death. Officially, Wright's death is in the books as accidental. In any case, this was the most unfitting end to a great fighter's life. Wright, who was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1997, was some fighter, and he was some person. And for a man who lived just 45 years, Albert Chalky Wright sure had himself quite a life. Chalky Wright. Okay, we got two more. On this day, we'll be profiling 8 fighters, all fought between 1900 and 1950. Man of Steel. Tony Zale is next. There's Man of Steel. Tony Zale. Rocky Rossell on his last day had a great trilogy. We're gonna cover that one of these Mondays. Remember, this Monday is Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez trilogy. Okay, let's get these last two in. Man of Steel is next. Come on, Man of Steel. Damn it. Let's see, somebody always gotta mess up. All the rest of them to jump right in there when I use the voice command. Oh, I know why I didn't jump in. I said Man of Steel. Tony Zale. Okay, yeah, Tony Zale. All right. Yeah, Tony Zale. Here he is on the screen there. Tony Zale, the Man of Steel. It seems like there are certain names that come up again and again when people discuss the golden age of boxing. Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano, Jack Johnson, Jack Dempsey, Rocky Graciano. But there were so many great fighters during that era, it seems many of them are forgotten. Perhaps because they weren't as charismatic as other fighters, or maybe just didn't get the breaks. Fighters that had stellar careers, but just never seemed to become household names, like the aforementioned greats. You know, Tony Zale is one of those fighters. Fans seem to recall his greatest rival, Rocky Graciano, more readily than Tony, even though Zale won 2 of their 3 fights. He was a 2-time world middleweight champion and had an impressive career record of 67 wins, 18 losses, 2 draws, 45 by way of knockout, right? And was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1991. Even got snubbed there. He didn't even go in with the rest of the old guys in 1990 in the inaugural year. Even got snubbed in with the next year. He was born Anthony Florian Zaleski in Gary, Indiana on May 29, 1913, and worked at the steel mills there through his amateur career. His nickname, the Man of Steel, was born from these roots, although it was also fitting as Zale seemed immune to pain. He turned pro in 1934 and rose steadily through the ranks. A ferocious body puncher, Zale would steadily wear down opponents with body shots, then set them up for the big knockout. Okay? Wear him down with body shots, set him up for the big knockout. Okay, I haven't been paying attention to the chat. Wow. Yeah, Arnie Boxing was the last one to come in. Yeah, salute Arnie Boxing. Okay. Now, Zale got his first shot at a title in 1940. Earlier that year, he had fought the National Boxing Association champion, Al Harstack, in a non-title fight, winning the decision. But like I said, they did a lot back then, putting the contract title in on the line. He beat Al Harstack, who was a champion, but it was a non-title fight. So Harstack kept the title. Now, the rematch was set, this time for the title, and Zale knocked Harstack out in the 13th round. So he got his title. He continued to fight for the next 2 years with title and non-title fights. And then in 1942, Zale joined the Navy to fight in World War II. When the war ended, Zale was still considered the champion. Now, at 33 years old, he began a series of 3 fights with Graciano, which took place over 21 months. Graciano was only 24 years old and coming off a series of knockouts. The first fight took place at Yankee Stadium, and Graciano, true to form, came out swinging. Both fighters went down in the first 2 rounds, and Rocky seemed to control the fight from that point on. But the Man of Steel somehow rallied and knocked Rocky Graciano out in the 6th round for a stunning comeback. Zale was still the man. Your head is go. The second fight took place a year later in Chicago. The fight had to be staged in Chicago as Graciano was in trouble for not reporting an attempted bribe. This fight was practically a mirror image of the first fight, with each fighter dishing out and receiving shot after shot. But it was Zale, not Graciano, who went down in the 6th round this time around, same round. Rocky had taken the lift of the crown off of Zale in the rematch. The 3rd and final fight took place later in 1947 in New Jersey. This time, Tony knocked out Graciano in the 3rd round with a vicious shot. Ended the series with Graciano. I knew I was going to do that. Graciano, but it's Rocky Marciano, Rocky Graciano. This was Graciano. Zale won it 2-1. Now, Zale only defended the title once more, losing by an 11th round knockout to Marcel Cerdan. And he retired after that, losing his title to Cerdan. Even though they had vicious ring wars, Zale and Graciano became good friends. Graciano was quoted once as saying, "There's only one way you can lick Tony Zale. You have to kill him." Each time Zale fought Graciano, it was voted as Ring Magazine's Fight of the Year. He had back-to-back fights of the year, 3 years straight. Never happened before or since. I don't know if you two people fight 3 years straight before or since, but yeah, back-to-back fights of the year. Even in a swan song against Cerdan, Zale gave it his all, and that fight was also voted Fight of the Year. Tony Zale was a devastating puncher with a granite chin, who always gave as good as he got. A fighter who might not have had the best tools, but made up for it with heart. He passed away on March 29, 1997, okay? And finally, The Rock, Rocky Graciano, will be the final one of the 8. We're going to get them in. We'll file 8 people today, just briefly, little 10, 15-minute talks about each other. And Rocky Graciano is the final profilee of the day. Let's see. Rocky Graciano. There he is. All right. There we go. Lights, camera, action. This is called Rocky Graciano and the Great Christmas Present. Well, okay, let's do Billy Conn, because that's basically talking about the same 3 fights that I don't know why. Same 3 fights that we just talked about with Tony Zale. Rocky Graciano was the opponent, so there's really no sense doing that, right? Because it's talking about the same 3 fights. They fought each other, remember? So at least shouldn't have did them back to back. Wow. But I still got Billy Conn waiting in the wings to finish it off. Or how about the best fighter between 1900 and 1950? Let's talk about that to close it out. The best fighter between 1900 and 1950. Billy Conn was the one that was beating Joe Louis at the 12 rounds. Remember, Joe Louis needed a knockout, and Billy Conn said, "Well, I'm gonna go for the knockout in round 13," and got knocked out. All he had to do was box. He wanted to. He had Joe Louis beat. He said, "I want to beat him in style. I'm going to stop the great Joe Louis, one of the best finishers in boxing history." And got stopped. Got greedy. Okay, here we go. Who was the greatest fighter from 1900 to 1950? No, that's the title of the show, remember? Boxing Greats, 1900 to 1950. So who was the greatest fighter from 1900 to 1950? Who was it? Was it Sugar Ray Robinson? I didn't put, there's Rocky Graciano right there, but we didn't talk about him. But hey, I'll put Stanley Ketchel back up there. Okay. Back in January of 1951, the Associated Press conducted a poll of sports writers to name the greatest fighter of the half century, pound for pound, 1900 to 1950. With plenty of superb fighting men to choose from, the results of the poll were perhaps surprisingly wide, with heavyweight king Jack Dempsey getting the most votes by far. Dempsey received 251 votes, with Joe Louis coming in second with 109 votes. Dempsey, the top writers of the day declared, was the greatest. This was a fine distinction Dempsey was honored with, especially when you consider some of the other 50 greats who were fighting over the years, 1900 to 1951. Men like Homicide Hank Henry Armstrong, who came in at third place, Harry Grab, Jack Johnson, Stanley Ketchel, Kid Chocolate, Gene Tunney, the Toy Bulldog, Mickey Walker, and so many more. Sugar Ray Robinson, Willie Pep, Sandy Sadler, Ezra Charles, Archie Moore, all these other people we profiled today, right? All those people were not retired yet, though, when this poll was taken. So their careers was a lot of those, Willie Pep, Ezra Charles, Sugar Ray, Rocky, when the poll were taken, their careers were still going on too, though. So, a lot of writers probably overlooked them for that reason, their careers were still going on. Okay? Now, all these years later, do you agree with the 251 writers who voted for Dempsey? Any boxing historians out there? You think it was really Dempsey? Now, the Manasseh Marler was, of course, a great, great fighter. Very much revolutionizing the sport of boxing with his savage, constantly bobbing, attacking style and approach. Dempsey's famously destructive performance against Jess Willard in the fight that saw him become world heavyweight champion in 1919 was referred to as animalistic and barbaric. This was not civilized, many shocked observers declared with disgust. Dempsey had introduced the world to the modern era of boxing. Yeah, he beat him so bad, he got accused of having something in his hand wrap. That's how bad he messed Jess Willard up. But it wasn't nothing in him. The founder of Ring Magazine, Ned Fleischer, said he was in the dressing room when they were wrapping his hands. He said it wasn't nothing put in his hand wraps. This manager he fired years later tried to say he wrapped them and put stuff in there, but Ned Fleischer said the guy's lying. He wasn't even the one that wrapped Dempsey's hand. But he just was mad because Jack had fired him, and years later he tried to say that, but it was a lie. Now, the Dempsey critics point to the fact that although he reigned as champ for 7 years, Dempsey managed only 6 title defenses. Also, some critics insist Dempsey's legacy is hurt by the fact that he never faced the top contender of his day, Harry Wills. But that wasn't Dempsey's fault. We talked about that the other day, remember? The government wouldn't allow that fight, remember? Because what happened between Jack Dempsey and Jess Willard, that was the last mixed race heavyweight championship fight, and they had race riots all over the country, and 20 people died. Hundreds were injured. So the government told the promoters not to make another mixed race championship fight, and it wasn't another one until over 22 years later when Joe Louis came on the scene. And then Joe Louis, they saw money dollar signs. They couldn't deny Joe Louis the chance to fight for the title. So that's when they lifted that ban then. But yeah, so Jack Dempsey not fighting Harry Wills was not Jack Dempsey's fault. Jack Dempsey didn't duck nobody. Told you to keep going as a little frail teenager and challenge anybody in the bar just to get money to eat. Don't care how big they was, right? So that don't sound like somebody's gonna duck somebody to me, right? But there's no denying Dempsey's enormous impact, his incredible punching power, his granite chin, his toughness, his speed, his desire, his all-around skill as a fighter. Now today, some fans historians or box historians may choose for that era Joe Louis or Sugar Ray Robinson when asked who was the greater fighter. Now, Sugar Ray Robinson's career was still going on. He was only like less than 10 years into his career at that point. He hadn't even had his middleweight reign yet. So yeah, that's why a lot of he really wasn't the greatest at that point. Sugar Ray Robinson wasn't. Jack Dempsey had a much better career than Sugar Ray at that point. Remember, Sugar Ray hadn't even had his middleweight career yet. So yeah, no way it should have been Sugar. But today people would say Sugar Ray, but it was from 1900 to 1950. So that excludes Sugar Ray. Jack Dempsey had a better career than Sugar Ray at that point. Now, if you say 1950 to 1960, you might get an argument for Sugar Ray. But 1950, no, it couldn't have been Sugar Ray Robinson. Maybe Joe Louis, yeah. While others might point to Jack Johnson and insist he ranks as a greater fighter than the man who ruled the world from July 1919 to September 1926, Dempsey. But back to early 1951, the choice was clear. Jack Dempsey was the greatest. Dempsey's final record was 68 fights, 54 wins, 6 losses, 8 draws, 44 knockouts. Okay? I know what I'm doing. 44 knockouts. 81.4% knockout ratio. Okay? Jack Dempsey. Yeah. Now, Dempsey won the title by annihilating Jess Willard. And while he retained the crown with wins over Billy Mist, Bill Brennan, Georgette Carpenter, Jimmy Darcy, Tommy Gibbons, and Louis Angel Firpo. Now, see, Jack Johnson would have had a much better chance if he would have fought some of them other black fighters back then that he avoided, right? He was fighting a lot of lower level fighters. He wouldn't fight the top black fighters of the day, so they really hurt him. In 1951, I would have picked Jack Dempsey too if I would have been in that poll. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have picked Dempsey. Now, Dempsey was stopped just once. This in his February 1917 fight with Fireman Jim Flynn. And they say Dempsey threw that one. Yeah. Did he do that fight? Now, Dempsey avenged the loss before, and after the fight he threw to Fireman Jim Flynn, he avenged the loss with a first round knockout of his own the following year. Okay? So yeah, Jack Dempsey would have been my choice too at that point. Now, if you move it to like 1960, then I would have picked Sugar Ray Robinson. But like I said, Sugar Ray Robinson in 1950 was less than 8 years into his career then, right? He hadn't even fought at middleweight yet. I think with him and Jake fought at 52 for the middleweight title, 51, something like that. But yeah, I would have picked Jack Dempsey too. Okay. Now don't forget, Monday is Juan Manuel Marquez and Manny Pacquiao series. Trilogy Monday, well, 4-fight Monday, right? Because we're going to do 4-fight series too. The Juan Manuel and the Pac-Man Monday. We're going to look at those 4 fights. We're going to analyze them. We're going to look at the lead up to them, look at the situation in boxing surrounding them, the fight, and then the aftermath. How the fights affected both these fighters' careers. We're going to summarize the trilogy at the end of, you know how we do. Summarize the trilogy after it's over. After it ended, the 4 fights after they ended all that. That's Monday, okay? So don't miss that one. And yeah, we finally got to talk about old Gunboat Smith today. Gunboat had one of the most fire resumes in history. He fought everybody from around it. Well, nobody fights everybody, but he fought the majority of the big names around this era and beat some of them. He beat Sam Langford once. Gunboat did, yes. Beat Sam Langford once, and there was somebody else big Gunboat beat too. I still have Gunboat up on here. Let me get Gunboat back up here real quick. Okay. And got his name like Al Booker told me a while back. He got his, because he was in the Navy, that's how he got his nickname of Gunboat. Yeah. From his Navy career. Let's get Gunboat back up here. Okay. Gunboat should be close by because he was the first one. Here's Gunboat. Here's Gunboat. He was the first one. After the fight of the day. And it's Edward. Edward was his government name, Edward Smith. But more commonly known as Gunboat. Yeah, Gunboat had a fire resume, man. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he fought everybody. Most of the big names around that time. He was a sparring partner for Jack Johnson and Stanley Ketchum. Before they fought, he sparred with both of them. That's how bad Gunboat was. Both of them wanted him in their camp, right? Mm-hmm. And Gunboat said, I'm not picking sides. I'll spar with both of y'all. Before George S. Carpenter, arguably the best French fighter of all time, between him and Marcel Cerdan. Gunboat was a bad man. Because when we talking about heavyweights from back then in shows, talking about who they fought, always mentioning Gunboat Smith. All the time. So he fought everybody. Gunboat did. Here we go. He even fought Harry Greb. Fought Harry Wills. Told you. And Harry Greb. Texas Tate. For old Texas Tate, whoever that is. No boy McCormick. Billy Misk. Twice. Fred Fulton. He fought Jack Dempsey. Told you. Gunboat. Canelo got one of them Gunboat resumes. Battling Levinsky. Gunboat Smith. Fought them all. Sailor Jack Carroll. Yep. Okay, but yeah, that's going to be it for today. But I appreciate everybody for coming through. We're going to join me Monday for the Manuel Pacquiao versus Juan Manuel Marquez. He even got the same name. Juan Manuel Marquez, Manuel Pacquiao. Monday, 4-fight series. We're going to look at all 4 of them. But I appreciate everybody for coming through today. Just Do Boxing comes on at 4 p.m. Let me get ready to get out of here. Is anybody going to be in here? I ain't going to be in here neither. I'm going to be over at Just Dudes too now. So, but it's Friday. I'm going to holler at y'all Monday with Manny and Juan Manuel. 4 fights. Great 4-fight series. Manny probably wished they would have stopped at 3 because see what happened to him in 4. He got slapped. One of them wife in the audience crying type naps. Yeah, but he was all right. Came back and had a great Hall of Fame career after that. Yeah. Fought money. So yeah, but we're going to talk about that Monday. But I appreciate everybody for coming through today. RNA Boxing, Just Do Boxing, Mike Rim, Mike Mazik, Al Bugga, and Miss Cass. Appreciate everybody 1,000,000%. Just Do coming on next. This is Cass Sports. I'll be back Monday with another one. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Boxtorian bringing you all that boxing history. Everybody have a great weekend. you in, McQueen? You had a great birthday the other day.